When our so-called president first announced that he would ban trans people from the military, I imagined spectacular celebrations in cities across the country where trans people and anyone else with a conscience would welcome this news with extravagant opposition to militarism in all its forms. Maybe gender transgression could bring down the state after all. Unfortunately, though, the institutions that call themselves the LGBT movement have long been obsessed with acquiring state and straight power rather than challenging structural violence. Since the early 90s, when ending the ban on openly gay soldiers became a central goal of the branded national organizations, so-called LGBT leaders and their allies have draped themselves in the stars and stripes as the U.S. has obliterated Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and who knows how many other countries, all the while funding the Israeli war on the Palestinians, propping up countless despotic regimes, plundering indigenous resources, poisoning the land, air, and water, and indoctrinating youth into a lifetime of brutality and trauma. The fight for trans inclusion in the military borrows from more than 2 decades of rhetoric in support of gays in the military. But in many ways, it may be worse, since trans people don't even have a fraction of the access to resources that gay people had 25 years ago. Trans people are routinely kicked out of our families of origin, harassed in school and at work, persecuted by religious leaders and politicians, and attacked on the street simply for daring to exist. Trans people are often denied access to basic services like healthcare and housing, fired from jobs or never hired in the first place, and forced to flee the places where we grew up simply to survive. Trans women, particularly trans women of color, are brutally murdered at an astounding rate. How does the so-called LGBT movement respond to this frightening pattern of systemic violence and exclusion? By holding up military service as a path to assimilation. What better way to prove that trans people are healthy and fit for employment than by participating in war for corporate profit? We're told that military service is a human right, as if the human rights of the people in villages obliterated by drone bombings don't matter. Rather than calling attention to the structural conditions that make military service a tragic option for some people desperate to escape, internalize, and ultimately further oppression, the LGBT establishment aggrandizes military service as the gold standard for bravery. There's so much cognitive dissonance when people say they support trans inclusion in the military, but not war. What exactly do they think the military is for? Or when people say the military helps trans people to escape poverty, and then fail to mention the countless ways in which the military creates poverty. No one should have to become part of a murderous institution in order to escape a scary home, pay for college, or get out of a dead-end town. Nevertheless, this is what we're told is progress. Unfortunately, the left, which for decades ignored queer and trans lives, now features pro-military, gay, queer, and trans people alongside in-depth coverage of the brutality of US wars, without even noticing the contradiction. This regressive tokenism is symptomatic of structural homophobia and transphobia. Just after Trump first announced his trans military ban, I turned on Democracy Now! And watched in horror as a trans woman with 18 years in the Army, including 3 active combat deployments in Afghanistan, extolled the glory of the military for 15 minutes without any serious questions. Then, a trans man currently stationed in Afghanistan told us that it was like a vacation because he could finally be his authentic self. After 20 minutes, Democracy Now! Finally allowed Dean Spade to articulate substantive critiques, but only while debating a pro-military filmmaker. If this is how our so-called allies cover our lives, it's hard to imagine our enemies. Now, the trans military ban is back in the news. And once again, the conversation is about who will be allowed to fight in unjust wars, rather than will the US ever stop destroying the world.